This is Leslie, Thinking Upwards. Welcome to the Walnut Women podcast. You know, right thinking about God leads to right living. Join our conversation as we discuss various topics through a biblical lens and a Christ-centered worldview. We hope the Word of God, through the power of the Holy Spirit, will help you live out gospel-transformed lives for the glory of God. In this episode, Alice, Meryl, and Regina join me as we talk about how COVID has impacted our work responsibilities and how we can remain faithful to the work God has called us to. This is the Walnut Women podcast. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to today's episode. We have another guest with us today, and I'm just going to ask you to introduce yourself, your family, and kind of like what you're doing right now during this pandemic.
Okay, thanks for having me. I'm Regina. I'm married to Terrence. We have 3 kids. Our oldest is Thomas. He's 16 and a junior in high school. Second is Rachel, who is 12 and 7th grader. And third is Tobias, who is 7 and in 2nd grade. And I'm a stay-at-home mom. By trade, I was a teacher for a good 10 years. And when Thomas started school was when we decided for me to stay at home so that I could kind of pull myself into school and volunteering and PTA and all that kind of stuff, so I could be involved in the community. That's me.
All right, well, welcome. We're excited that you can join us today. So today's topic really is about another big aspect of our lives that this COVID pandemic has kind of disrupted, and it is the topic of work and vocation and also education for those who are students. And basically what we know about this pandemic is how it's changed the whole work environment and the whole work routine and structure, and even it's impacted family lives because a lot of work is now remote. And we know schools have started recently and they have gone virtual, or it's called distance learning. So all of this is kind of like a really big impact and disruption to what was formerly known as pre-COVID working routine. And now a lot of it has just come into our homes and has impacted people with families and kids. So I just wanted to ask you guys how your personal lives at home has changed as a result, and how have you guys really made adjustments and made space to accommodate the new changes, both for you and your family. So we'll start with you, Regina, since you're our guest today.
Well, thanks. Well, at the beginning, I think there's still a lot of unknown about the disease itself, but I think when it stopped, everything stopped. Like kind of, especially for us with 3 kids and 3 schools and activities, and then Terrence working at church. It felt like life stopped. Like I was all of a sudden not driving everywhere every day, dropping kids off, and like we were deleting things off the calendar constantly. This was gone, this was gone, this was gone, this was gone. And so it was kind of weird, but also in some ways a little bit relaxing, because I was like, wow, I don't have to be anywhere today. But I think we did have to adjust to having everybody at home. I think me being a stay-at-home mom, I didn't have to adjust too much. In my work, I just kind of was doing what I normally do, but kind of hyped up. So I felt like I was constantly cooking because everybody was eating all the time.
It's true. When they're home, they're just eating.
Yeah, there's 3 meals a day, every single day. So everything was kind of just hyped up a little bit for me. And I think Terrence's schedule has always been somewhat flex. So it wasn't too hard of a thing for him to be just working from home. So in that sense, I'm very thankful and very grateful that, it wasn't too disrupted in that sense. Like we didn't feel like we were changing everything nothing, it wasn't like completely upside down. And I think with my background as a teacher, the kids being at home doing school wasn't too hard. And I did stress like that last day, March 13th, Friday the 13th, when they came home, I was like, you guys are not on vacation. This is still going to be school. But at that time, it was only supposed to be 2 weeks.
Yeah.
2 weeks we were going to be home. So it did change a lot in that sense. After those 2 weeks, we were like, okay, so it's not going to be this. It's going to be, we're staying here for a while. But I think the time at home has been helpful because we were so spread out for all the time. So just even though everyone was doing different things, I think God really provided a time for us just to be in the same place at the same time, to be in each other's presence, to see how we all can, work together in a small space. So that kind of thing was a blessing. For sure. We, the kids had their own, they had to adjust to being at home. But I think for us, being able to see them more often was a big blessing. I don't know if it was for the kids. Not to be with mom and dad all the time. But for us, I think it was a good change of pace.
So I'm just curious, but like in your situation, your kids are spaced out, so they're all in separate schools. So was that like a lot of work for you to manage? Like how much management at home did you actually have to be on top of them to complete their work assignments and, their different class schedules?
Thankfully, the older two managed themselves. They, they reached out to their teacher when needed. Although between March and June, the schools were not grading anything. Nothing was, there was no consequence to
they made exceptions for that season, huh?
Because I think even the teachers had to adjust.
That's what you call crisis schooling, right? Give stuff up just to make it happen.
So whatever the teachers pushed out, that's what they did. But they did give the kids the option to do it or not do it. I didn't give them that option. And said, whatever the teachers give you, you need to do, because I think it provides you with some structure at home. And, and even though you want to kind of, we did relax some, they didn't have to wake up at 6 a.m. anymore. Have to, do everything, by a certain time all the time. But I wanted there to be structure because I think that that's what they thrive. My kids thrive on that structure. And you can tell by how they're responding now to the new current distance learning plan, that the structure that was, that's always been ingrained in them was helpful to them to be able to manage themselves. I don't have to be on top of them. They know, when their schedules are, what class, what assignments. I mean, even Tobias, he knows when to log on, when to log off, when to log back on, all that kind of stuff. And he's in second grade. I do have to help him, occasionally pull out certain materials because everything's kind of, in a pile or in a book, and he's supposed to tear things out or supposed to. So those kind of little things that he needs help with, I'll help him with it. But in terms of the actual school part, like learning with the teacher and being online and being responsible, the most of the time they take care of themselves. And so there was adjustment in being in a different place, but I think that because they love that structure, they know they do best within that structure, they kind of created their own schedule and their own timelines for them to finish things.
So now with this new whole school year starting, and like this is kind of like the formal education for the year, like how many actual hours do they have to put in now compared to the old model when they were in the physical classrooms? Like, is it like less hours in total just because of the nature of virtual classrooms?
So they're in school from about 8:30 or 9, they're depending on which school, till about 1 or 2. So it's a
Okay.
little bit shorter. And then there are breaks for lunch and 15-minute breaks between each class. Um,
Is there a lot of homework?
the older two do have um, similar amounts of homework that they would if they were in physical school, but they get off earlier. They're done pretty much at 1. So they do have some time, and they don't have to travel anywhere anymore. So it's not like
Yeah,
they make time for that. But there is challenges in all this extra screen time. You work so hard to limit their screen time, and now
exactly.
everything is
Yeah.
screen time.
Screen, yeah.
So like yesterday, like for example, Rachel's in school from 9 to 1, and then she has an online dance class from 5 to 7, and then she's online for Unicoi from 7:30 to 10. So I think that's a huge challenge.
Exactly.
We're still figuring out how to limit screen time, but that's the only way that they can interact with people too.
Exactly.
So you don't want them to do that also. So it's definitely a challenge.
How about for you, Alice?
Well, when Regina was describing her children's, online class and schedule, yeah, I can totally, understand, and it just resonates with me because, yeah, we're going through the same thing, and I think that pretty much what she shared is what I've been experiencing at home. But I do appreciate the time that we have together. Ever since the time that we started quarantine, everyone is back home, and again, there's a lot more time that we can spend together. Because of that, we need to be more intentional. Just because we're more time together at home doesn't mean that we're always together. So we still have to keep the structure, keep the schedule, and just be able to, again, stay intentional and come back together. The time to either read the Bible together, devotion together, or pray together, or we can even just have time to really discuss a lot of the heart issue as well as hard issues, things that we often get ignored when life was so busy. Our days that we used to be marked by different activities.
Exactly.
Every day there's something happen, right? Like Regina was saying, different activities. But now it's like we're all home, and almost to a point where I kind of forgot which day of the week it is now because we don't have that, activity to kind of keep us, on mark. But again, being intentional is one thing we have learned to continue to deepen our relationship with one another, also with God, during this time. Yeah.
So I know that Josh did he start college yet?
It's gonna start next Monday, 2 days from now. Yeah.
How is that going?
Yeah.
Transition. I know his graduating class got hit really hard.
Yeah, I think some with all the graduating class. Yeah. So, yeah, but you know what? But I was telling him that wow, each one of them have received such a personal honor and recognition. It's like usually everything is in stadium, the graduation, commencement, but now everything was online. We have like family and relatives came to visit. When he was graduating. We were just outside in a driveway, but it was still very nice to have our youth counselor, to do the drive-by, senior surprise, and it was really, 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 really special, for them. So for him, again, I actually felt a little bit uneasy because, when it comes to starting school, in a couple of days, because, when I was in college, we used to go on campus, we get to meet our advisor, we get to meet people on campus. Now they didn't have any of these things. And so they have depend on everything online communication. He would never met his professors, but he, had to actually check in with each class, each course, making sure that the professor knows that he's registered with them. And then they will send him the link to go to attend a specific class. So all this thing is online, so I would tell him just make sure you check your emails and make sure that you don't miss anything, so yeah, so all that, it's just everything's online, and even school, they gave out, they do like a virtual Q&A sessions with parents, in cover all area, academic advisement, they have, financial planning, they have, on-campus services. Everything is online, in virtual Q&A sessions. It just, again, online for everything. So yeah, getting used to that.
How about for you, Meryl? I know that you started going back to work. So why don't you share a little bit about that, how that transition's been for you, if it's impacted, your office in any way?
Yeah, so I guess in the beginning of COVID, I wasn't working because, dental offices were closed. So there was an adjustment of Hallie working at home and just invading our home space.
Invading.
Yeah, because I think in our normal lives or in pre-COVID, we tried really hard to he tries to have a good work-life balance in terms of, okay, things at work, I'll try and keep it at work and I won't overwhelm you with what's going on at work so that we're not always talking about church. Even though it might sound good to some people, it doesn't work for our family. Always talking about church. It's just overwhelming. But COVID forced that reality in our house. And so that was a really difficult, I would say I was really glad that I wasn't working at that time because that was a huge adjustment in it of itself of Hallie working at home and then having a newborn and trying to handle Haley. She always needs attention. I wish I could just leave her somewhere and she could just self-entertain for hours, but it doesn't work that way. So in reality, I think what ended up happening is that Hallie does a lot of his sermon prep or deep thinking at night. So then we have to figure out when are we going to actually communicate as a couple, so we have to squeeze that in. But a lot of times he'll be up 12, 1, 2 working on stuff because he needs to have a string of uninterrupted time to think. And when I went back to work, I think that was a pretty big adjustment for me. For those of you who don't know, I'm a dentist, and just having to wear a lot of extra personal protective equipment and not being able to breathe and just having this mark on my face all the time when I take off my mask. The other day, my patient said, "You need to get a new mask. You look jacked up." And I was like, well, I need this mask to protect me. But yeah, and it's just hard because having all that stuff and trying to physically work because as a dentist, even though people might not think so, it's quite laborious to be in a person's mouth and to concentrate on those little things. And it's hard when you have all this stuff blocking your view. So that was an adjustment, just an adjustment on many levels due to COVID, and just experiencing this new normal, I think was difficult, but I think things are just falling back into a new routine now.
Yeah, well, I mean, for our family, my personal work responsibilities didn't change because I was a homeschool mom. And, even in our education, we just had to adjust to the lack of access for our kids to go anywhere. But that was probably the biggest adjustment that we had to make. Actually, in the very beginning, I don't know if other moms feel this way, but whenever I know I have to be with the kids in our house for a very long period of time, I have some moments of struggle, thinking, oh my goodness, how is this going to happen? How am I going to spend the whole day with them in our house without being able to take them anywhere? Take that times the number of days we don't get to leave the house. There's some dread, I don't know what we're going to do. Yeah. And I think we're still in this phase because in their life stage, I'm pretty much needed every minute. One of my kids will come up and have some kind of need, and it's different because they're all developmentally in a different life stage. So I think that was really scary to think, I don't know what we're going to do with ourselves and stuck in this house. So, and then there was Darren, who is still working remotely. And, for me, I'm thankful because this is an unexpected blessing to have his presence in the house, not necessarily his physical health, but it's just the presence because, I think when there's no accountability and I'm the only adult in here, I tend to have bigger reactions to small things like cleaning up messes or things. I noticed that I would get I would give in to my anger more easily and just a lot of yelling. But with his presence at home, I feel like there's a sense of understanding, like the crazy chaos that nobody else sees. If he hears it and he's in the other room, I just know, okay, I'm not the only one dealing with this. And it's just really humble work in the home right now. And so, I mean, that's actually been really helpful. But on his end, I know it's been a huge sacrifice because he's working less productively with that the kid noise in the background. And one time when I was at a meeting, Eve had gone up to him and just whispered in his ears, I need to go bathroom. And it was just like permission, like I'm just gonna go. And then he was in a meeting himself, and then everyone heard. But I mean, thankfully, like they understand that if your coworkers are your family members, that's just the reality. But one thing that I think has really been hard is just that lack of the physical routine of being able to get up. And there's that routine of like getting dressed because you're going to go out and see people, and then the drive to get there. I think those things are physical routines that help the flow of your day, right? And just because work has transferred onto virtual space for a lot of people, and now we're all more on our screens or on our phones for meetings, I mean, that just tires us out a little bit more because your eyes aren't interacting physically with a human being, but with the screen, which is like more screen time. And I think about how like we lost those physical routines that people need to just let the day go by more smoothly, because you just roll out of bed, and then some people, they just throw on that polo shirt right in front of their laptop. It's like there's nothing else to do. There's nothing else exciting about the day because physically you're just doing the same things. And I think I really miss that about just the regular routine of work. All those transitions really helped our day go by quickly. I guess we'll kind of turn the topic now to some of the lessons and blessings that you feel God has really been speaking to you about or convicting you of, and what his purposes are for the work that he's given to us, or maybe like as a mother or even like a wife, how has he required you to grow in more Christ-likeness in order to get this work done under these conditions? So that'll be our last question for today.
That's a loaded question.
As always, let's be asked.
These are the kinds of questions I'll ask Darren right before he goes to sleep. So
I'd be mad, Leslie. I'd be like, stop bothering me. I think with the whole COVID thing, how like a lot of people lost their jobs, and a lot of people, their work was uncertain, like they were furloughed, and I think it really called into question like a lot of people's security or maybe their identity. And I think sometimes we're tempted to think about work as just something that we do to provide or to fund like the fun stuff that we do. But I think it's important to remember that there's this book by Tim Keller called Every Good Endeavor, and it's talking about work. And in it, he talks a lot about how, work was something that was here before the fall. Like God made Adam and Eve, and then he told them, be fruitful and multiply and subdue the earth and, cultivate it. And there's like a form of work there. And if you think about it, God himself works, right? He's like really busy. I think sometimes we think of God as this being who just sits up in heaven and is just like relaxing on a armchair and just looking on earth, but God is so busy doing so many things. He's redeeming things, he's answering prayer, he's and so I think as humans made in the image of God, it's part of our design to work. And I think sometimes instead of viewing work as just a means to an end, which I'm tempted to do a lot because I'm just like, oh, I'm so tired. Like, I don't want to wear this PPE anymore. Like, I don't want to hear about how patients hate dentists. Like, it's not nice when people tell you all the time, we don't like you. We don't like coming here to see you. And so like sometimes all those things like they irk at me, but then I have to remember like this is like part of what God has created me to do, and he has gifted me to do these things. And instead of looking at it as like, oh, I just got to finish the day, it's like I got to look at it as, well, what, like, God has allowed me to do this, and part of it is, you know, like redeeming his creation, you know, and being just healing hands to different people, and just seeing the greater purposes God has for my work. And I think that applies in the home too, because in the same way, it could just be like what you're describing, Leslie, like, dude, I just want to get through the day. I don't want the kids to like make a mess. I don't want them to kill each other. I don't want to kill them, you know, like I just want to survive, you know. And then it's hard to like enjoy what God has given us when we have that attitude, and to just remember there's much calling that God has given us as mothers, even though sometimes it's really crazy, especially when our kids are young. But we have this opportunity to really mold and shape our kids. And something that I realized with COVID is that, you know, this is really inconvenient. It's inconvenient for Hanley to be here working without his commentaries, and for him to go in and record, and like it's just weird. It's not meant to be like what you were saying. You know, we're made for physical interaction. We're made for physical presence. But the blessing, like something that Regina and Alice has mentioned, is like the time that we get to spend together. And I just thinking during these formative years of my kids, I don't think Hanley would be able to naturally, you know, see them grow so much. You know, a lot of times I would just be reporting to him, yeah, Haley's going through this, but now he like understands, like he deals with it, he sees it, and he's like, oh, like she's quite temperamental in these, you know, like he's learning about his daughter. And it's really cool because at the same time I get to see this like father aspect of him grow, where he's learning how to parent Haley, not from the top, like big picture wise, but he's learning to parent her in like these everyday little moments. And I think that comes naturally for women more, but for him, I can really see how he's trying to learn that, and how like how he's benefiting from that. So it's a blessing and a curse at the same time, I guess.
Thanks for sharing that. Do you guys have any other personal blessings or encouragements for other women in your same situation?
Well, in the same kind of, I guess, thought, when you talk about Hanley being able to kind of parent in this, you know, and see her grow, I think the distance learning for parents who are struggling and kind of, you know, trying to make, especially parents of little ones who have to, like kindergartners or first graders who have to kind of do things online now. But I think as a kindergarten teacher, I was always so impressed with the amount of work and amount of growth that they would do from the beginning of kindergarten to the end of kindergarten. And, you know, as much as I could in conference or in phone calls or in whatever, tell parents how much they're growing, they could never see it like in class. Like, sometimes those light bulbs would come on in class and I would be like, oh my gosh, you got it. But I can't convey that as well as, you know, you can when you see it. And I think parents, I know like it's so hard and so crazy to do this distance learning, but take the opportunity to watch, like when your kids are watching your teachers online and how they're interacting. The teachers are working so hard. I really would not want to go back right now. So there, but like at least the ones that I've been able to see, I have seen them work so hard in trying to get them to, you know, bounce back and forth ideas with the kids and sing songs and get them to move and jump up and down. And I think that that's something special that you wouldn't normally be able to see if you were just dropping them off at school.
Right.
You know, and so I think, you know, that in that way, like, I think it's a special time for you to see how your kids learn, what your kids are learning, and when that light bulb does go off, like when things finally click for them. I think that's really exciting for them to be able to see. So I've been, you know, I have friends who have kindergartners that are first year in school, and I know it's so difficult for them, but you know, I encourage them to kind of take this opportunity to see past the crazy and see into what their kids are learning and in their minds and things like that.
Yeah, it's just very sweet to hear what you guys share because it just reminds me of how my kids were small and we're homeschooled too. So those little like teachable moments were always there, and those moments are very sweet. Like Meryl saying how Henley was able to be home and to really witness the growing, of Haley's growth, step by step. And those are moments that I don't think any day wanted to miss. And I think that the time that I believe that just like God-given opportunity for the father. Even I heard Terrence share, even Ray too, that how they get to spend time with the children more now. Like, they get to have more meaningful conversation. And sometimes those conversations, we didn't have those opportunities in the past because we're so occupied by all those activities and things that we have to be this, we have to be here, we have to be there. But now we're at home, even though we have online meeting. But those times that we have at home, we are available to hear our children, to even have good discussion, about just issues in life, like sometimes just and Joshua, they will see something on social media and they'll bring it up, and there goes our conversation for the evening. What does God's word say about this? What would Jesus do? What do you think as a Christian, as a Jesus follower, how are we to respond to those issues? And especially when they talk to friends are not believers and they have different value system, how do you approach that as a believer? So it's just very packed in a conversation, but it's just so good, and I miss those times, and because before we were so busy, we didn't have that, now I feel like we're going back to it, and I really, really thankful, and I also want to encourage other moms out there. I know like Leslie and Meryl, because your kids are still young, and I know that I gotta talk about how to get through the day. I'm like, yeah, I was there before too. It's like, but you know what though? But God is so good. I was reading like just James 1:17 says that every good gift is from above, and perfect gifts from above. And I do see even this quarantine, this pandemic, is not something that we really desire to have or go through for this many months. But if we choose to look at those little moments and those good and perfect gifts, they're all good, perfect gifts from the Lord, Father of lights. And He wants us to enjoy that and to have that, experience, just like how He would, shepherd us and loves us, and we'll do the same thing for our children even when time is hard. So so that's the encouragement I want to give to the moms. You are doing a great job, moms, and dads too, of course.
Yeah, I mean, this whole topic of work, I mean, I used to be a teacher myself too before I resigned to be fully, committed to being a stay-at-home. And I think some of the struggles that I went through in that transition was just the struggles of feeling like, oh, I lost a place where I can grow myself or grow my skills, because the difference between working outside versus being a stay-at-home mom is two separate animals, right? Like in the home, a lot of your role and work is in like the posture of serving your family. And you're not like growing yourself necessarily, where at the end of the day, you can say, look at this new thing that I did, right? And your moments in the home are longer because, there's this small window when those kids are really young and they need you. And it's a really intense time of parenting because you're just in their lives like constantly, and it just never ends, and you're doing it sometimes sleep deprived if you have a newborn. And I just think about how I've been in this journey for a couple years now, and I think the lesson that God has really been growing in me is that the most important work I can do for the Lord is not to make a great name for myself or to count how many skills and accomplishments that I have achieved or I have gained from this experience, because, as a stay-at-home mom, I don't get to boast in those things. I can only boast in the fact that I am loving my children faithfully, and that kind of love right now still requires a humble, sacrificial posture of just service. And to add to that, I recently got into somewhat of a little challenge with Darren, and I think it relates to my service to my husband. And I think, sometimes I forget how to serve and show support to Darren because I'm really caught up in all the things that I have to do, what I'm responsible for, and all the people outside of our home that I want to minister to and serve, like those in our church or, our neighbors and our friends. And then, I'm just really thankful that he had the courage to tell me that he didn't feel his needs were being met through, me just asking him about his day. And I think that's the challenge, because we see each other all the time now. And I don't have those set moments where I can say, oh, how was work? Because, we're just side by side in the same household all day long. So I think I just felt really convicted that I have to be intentional as well to really support Darren. And I know it's so hard because I spend my whole day serving our kids. And, by the end of the day, I don't have a lot of energy to do it for my fourth kid. But, that's like God's calling for us as wives, to really show love to our spouses in that way. And I think I really need that intentional reminder to myself. Otherwise, we'll always get into these cycles where he'll come and tell me after some time where I haven't given him a lot of attention, and he'll just tell me like he wants me to care for him. I think that's also part of like our wifely responsibility, like how to care for our husbands in a way where they feel like they're cared for. So I think that's a tricky balance. God's given us a lot of influence over our families, and also to those that he's sending in our lives through work, through our friendships, and our relationships with other people outside the family. So I think for today, we'll just end our session. And I think this whole topic of work is all about doing it for the glory of God and doing it with excellence and diligence, so that at the end of it, we can truly be able to tell God that we were faithful and we didn't complain, and we remained thankful, and we remained in the Lord as to what he is calling each of us to do. And he will give us the strength to do it, even if it is uncomfortable in that moment, or it's really humbling, or it's breaking our pride. So thank you for joining us today, and we'll just end our episode.
Thank you, Regina.
Thank you for having me.
If everything we do should be for the glory of God, then pleasing him should be our aim. My prayer is that you will be faithful to work diligently and excellently in all that God has called you to do. Join us next time on the Walnut Women podcast. Thanks for listening.